Hello Internet, my name is Quinn and this is Blondihacks. It's been a few months since my big move here to Canada, and I know many of you have been asking for a shop tour of the new space. I've finally got it kind of where I consider it complete. As far as complete goes, it's at least a 2.0 and I don't expect any major patches here in the near future, so this seemed like a good time to do it. I'm not a huge fan of shop tours in general. It seems like a bit of a vanity exercise, but I do like watching other people's shop tours because I like to see how they organize and how they lay out their space and so on and get ideas from it. So hopefully this video might do that for you. So let's go. Here's a bird's eye view of my shop so you can kind of get a sense of the general layout. You can see that it occupies half of a 2-car garage, so it's a 1-car garage if you like. And I think this is plenty of space for a model engineering / hobby scale kind of shop. If I pan a little to the left here, you can see what I call the dirty end of the shop. That's where all of the grinding and the welding and other such processes go, with the goal of keeping them away from the machine tools at the other end, because you don't want grinding dust and so on getting anywhere near your machine tools. Tucked into the corner on the right here is my little cleaning station. I'm a big believer in keeping the shop clean both before and after a job and as you work. Cleanliness really promotes precision and also just makes the shop more pleasant to be in. Now let's talk about general layout here a bit more, because one thing you may notice is that I've definitely placed a priority on work surfaces over size of machines. A space like this is certainly big enough to cram in a 12-inch floor standing lathe along with a Bridgeport knee mill or something along those lines, and lots of people choose to do that. In my case, however, I've chosen to prioritize work surfaces because I find that a lot more enjoyable and pleasant when I've got lots of extra space to work with. And for the size of work that I do, really these small machines have done me really well. And while the footprint of these machines is honestly the same as much larger machines, the additional storage that I get above and below them really makes the difference in terms of how many tools I can have and thus how many different kinds of things I'm able to do. People are constantly telling me to get bigger machines, but I've chosen to stick with these smaller machines because they really do suit my working style and the types of projects that I'm doing much better, I think. In kitchen design, there's a concept known as the triangle, which is that the refrigerator, the stove, and the sink should all be within arm's reach of a single place in the kitchen. I've applied the same philosophy here in my workshop, which is that the mill and the lathe form 2 points of a triangle, and the third being the inspection bench, and all of my tooling for both machines is within that triangle. This is kind of a layout I stumbled upon on my last shop because that was really the only place I had to lay out the machines, but it honestly turned out to be incredibly efficient, and this has really worked well for me. Because the mill and the lathe overlap a lot in tooling, it's pretty easy to store all the tooling for both machines in one place. Now I say all the tooling, really I'm talking about the 80th percentile daily driver tooling. There's a subset of all of the tooling that you might have for both machines that you're going to use multiple times every single day. It doesn't all have to fit right there. This kitchen island, if you will, here on the right is what I call my inspection bench. This is where I put my drawings and references. All of my metrology and measuring equipment is all in here, and I've got my surface plate here on the corner. So this is really the thinking bench, if you like. Stored right under the work surface in this bench here, you can see I've got all of my measuring tools and so on. And then that vertical drawer on the end, which is arm's length away from both the mill and the lathe, is also where I store dial indicators and micrometers and so on. So you can see that the inspection equipment, while devoted to the inspection bench, is also within arm's reach of my work triangle there, because of course you need the micrometers and so on the lathe and the mill very often as well. And then my inspection bench there also has gauge blocks and gauge pins and basically anything that you might need for measuring and inspection. I found it really valuable over the years to keep all of that stuff in one place rather than spreading it around wherever there's space, as tends to happen with things like gauge pin sets and gauge block sets. I want to point out here though that my storage and organization is always evolving. So this is how things are right now, but over time I learn new tricks or my work style evolves and I reorganize things as needed to suit how I'm currently working. So this tooling cabinet, for example, I actually did a whole video largely talking about this cabinet called Small Shop Organization. I'll link to that below. So if you've watched that video, then you know mostly how this cabinet is laid out. But since that video, I've actually decided really I need a drawer devoted to drills. Over the years, I've accumulated more and more drills, and I've found that having a lot of different kinds of drills is super useful, and having them all on hand in one place is also very useful. So I rearranged things to make space to devote a drawer just to the drills. In the corner here, I've got a standard full index of imperial jobber length drills, so that's fractional number and letter drills. But then I've also got smaller indices over here devoted to screw machine length drills, also fractional number and letter. I've really gotten into using the stubby drills for most things, so having them all handy here like this is really great. And I do work in metric sometimes as well, so I've got a set of metric drills there. I've got some specialty things like these DeWalt drills here are actually square ground drills, so they leave a square shoulder at the bottom of the hole. That's incredibly useful in many situations. And then I've got my reamers here as well and my center drills because, you know, if you're going for a drill, chances are you're also going to need a reamer and a center drill in short order as well. The idea is, as much as possible for a given operation, I can open one drawer and everything I need for that operation is going to be in that drawer. There's another important subtlety to how these drawers integrate into the triangle that I want to point out. The style of this cabinet is such that I can open the drawers all the way and they'll lock open like this. And so the drawer forms a tray effectively then with all of my lathe tooling here, for example. So while I'm working on the lathe, I typically have this drawer standing open like this and all of my tooling is there on display. And then when I need to clean up, I simply close the drawer. I'm a big believer in having everything put away. I try to reduce visual clutter in my shop as much as possible because, again, I find that increases my enjoyment and also makes it much easier to keep everything clean. I don't like a lot of things hanging on the walls or a lot of things that are stored out on open benches where they're going to get dusty and get oily and get covered in chips and so on. So as much as possible, I like to keep everything put away, but these drawers that lock open into trays still makes them easy to access, which can otherwise be the downside of putting things in drawers. This is my mill tooling drawer here, and of course, milling machines have a lot of tooling that they need. So this is, again, just my daily driver tooling, if you will. So these are my daily driver end mills, but I've got a whole other drawer over in the storage area that has lots more end mills for special use cases and so on. Over here in the ironically pink toolbox is all of my hand tools. So they're organized very similarly to my tooling drawers. The only thing I would call out here is that I use a lot of 3D printed sorting tools like these guys here, because with hand tools, storing them vertically often buys you a lot more space. These organizers here were actually a 3D printer file sent to me by a viewer. So you know who you are. Thank you very much for those. Comparatively, the tooling drawers that we just looked at use mostly my patented cardboard and hot glue organization system, which I'm still a big believer in. It's very quick and easy to adapt as your needs change. Kind of in the middle area of the shop, if you like, are the other major power tools that are not machine tools. There's my 3-in-1 sheet metal machine here. This is a recent addition. This is a press, a finger brake, a shear, and a roll. This particular one is from a Canadian distributor, but it's the same machine that like Eastwood sells, and Harbor Freight has one, Princess Auto has one. They're all the same machine. These things seem like a really great value. I haven't used it a lot yet, but I'll keep you posted on it. And then, of course, to the left, we have my bandsaw, which used to be portable, but is now mounted to the wall, which makes it very, very handy. You can see my shop-made table on it there, which I did a video on. And then, of course, the humble drill press to the left of that. These are all machines that tend to require space around them for working on larger and longer pieces. So I've done my best to give them each as much space as I can within the area that I have here. These machines then, in combination with the welding table in the corner there, effectively form my fabrication area, if you like. These are all machines that tend to get used together for the same parts of a project. The big gray cabinet in the middle here is all of my hardware. So I effectively have an entire hardware store in this thing. This I absolutely love. It is just so worth it to have a large stock of hardware on hand in your shop. It doesn't take up a lot of space, and it saves you so much waiting for things to be shipped or having to drive to the hardware store and hope they have the thing that you want. Just accumulate lots and lots of hardware over time and keep it sorted, and you'll always have what you need. I would say 95% of the time when I'm working on a project, I have the exact nut, bolt, or screw that I need on hand. It's very rare now that I have to order anything. The way that I did that is over the years, when I first started making stuff, I initially just ordered lots of extra hardware anytime I needed it. So over the years, it has just accumulated. And as long as you keep it sorted and organized, then it's an incredibly useful resource. Up above that here, I have sort of an electrical station, if you will. I've got all of my rechargeable tool batteries here. I've just mounted those chargers upside down to the underside of this cabinet. And I like using the undersides of things like this because it gives you a lot of extra storage options without, again, increasing visual clutter substantially. You don't have a bunch of stuff hanging on the walls, and you don't have stuff sitting out on horizontal surfaces where it's going to be in the way and collect dust and oil and so on. So I really like mounting things upside down wherever possible. If we take a step back, you can see how that stuff's all really handy, really convenient, but doesn't take up a lot of space and doesn't introduce a whole lot of visual clutter. And then on the left of the chargers there, I've got some 3D printed brackets that are used to hold the batteries that have been charged and are ready to use. I just got those off Thingiverse. If you just search for your brand of tool, battery holder, you'll find one. Taking a look at the dirty end of the shop now, you can see left to right here, I've got my hearth, which is for silver soldering. Sometimes I also do silver soldering here. Then to the right of that, I've got the D-bit grinder. If you're not familiar with these machines, they're sort of an elementary form of tool and cutter grinder that I think is a good fit for a hobby shop. I've got a series of videos on this machine, so go ahead and check out my playlists for that. And then my bench grinder, and then I've got a little welding area over here. It's not a huge welding area, but I don't do big fabrication projects really, so for me this is plenty of space there. And then the welder is tucked down in the corner there. I've got the 220 volt outlet for the welder right on the wall next to it there. As it sits right now, it's like a little 2 foot by 3 foot welding area, which again for me is plenty. This is a low budget welding bench, which is just a big box store set of heavy shelves with a 3/16 steel plate that I got from my local welding shop. They cut it to size for me on their big hydraulic shear, and I just bolted it to the top of the shelving there. So that created a really nice, quick and dirty steel bench that's actually very flat and was very easy to make. If I do need to do a larger welding project, it only takes 5 minutes to move the bench grinder and the D-bit grinder out of the way, and then I've got access to the full 8 feet there of welding bench. In addition to keeping all the stuff away from the machine tools, the other thing I like about having all the dirty stuff down here is that silver soldering, grinding, and welding are all things for which you occasionally want ventilation if you're doing a lot of it. So that roll-up door behind this bench can be rolled up a little bit or a lot as needed, and weather permitting, of course, to get some ventilation back here for big jobs. Then to the left of that, to sort of complete the fabrication end of the shop, I've got my horizontal bandsaw here. It's kind of out in the open because it needs a lot of room on both sides of it for handling long pieces of stock, so it's ready to use here in that position. If I do need room behind it, of course, I have to move my truck there, as you can see, but that's fine. I can also wheel this out into the middle of the room if I need to. Finally, in the back corner there is the ever-present hydraulic hoist. You see me use this all the time. This thing is such a loyal little buddy for me. I can't imagine not having one of these in a shop. As you can see, they fold up and take remarkably little space, but it's just such an amazing tool for manipulating the heavy machines and heavy pieces of stock that are so often used in welding, fabrication, and machine shop type atmospheres. And if you work alone, then it's just a godsend. There's many, many things I've done in my shop that I could not have done without that thing. And I'm sure it's prevented me from getting hurt in situations where I might have been tempted to attempt something that I really shouldn't without hydraulic assistance. But since it's there, it takes no time to unfold it and get it going, so I do, and thus I haven't hurt myself yet lifting something heavy. Let's talk a little bit more about quality of life things, because again, these are really important to maximize your enjoyment of time spent in the shop. First and foremost, of course, is light. You cannot have too much light. Here on the ceiling of my shop, I basically carpet bombed the ceiling with light as soon as I moved in. I have 6 8-foot dual LED strips there and 2 4-foot dual LED strips there for a grand total of 112 linear feet of LED lighting, and it's awesome. Having enough light and having no shadows anywhere on your work makes your work easier, makes it more accurate, and of course makes it easier to film a YouTube channel, hypothetically, if that was the thing that you're into. I'm not judging, I'm just saying. I think a lot of workshops underestimate the value of light. Light is a tool for mental well-being, but it's also a tool for precision work. It's a tool of cleanliness, and it's a tool of safety. The more light you have in your shop, the more you will enjoy it and the better work you will do. To give you a sense of how much light this is, it actually hurts a little to look at my ceiling now, and that's just about right. Tucked up into the upper right corner there, you might have noticed this happy fellow. This is good for the humans and the machine tools. This is a heat pump. I use it to keep the temperature modest and above the dew point in here all year round so that the machines won't get condensation and rust. And it also has a dehydration mode, and it's good down to -20 degrees Celsius for heat. And of course it acts as air conditioning in the summer. Modern heat pumps are absolutely incredible machines. It costs very little to run and it keeps the shop incredibly comfortable, assuming the building is of course well insulated and vapor barriered, but this shop is because it's code here, so the heat pump has really been one of the best things I've done, I think, to this shop so far. Another often overlooked quality of life thing is a sound system. I think every shop should have a sound system. It doesn't have to be fancy. In this case, I'm just using a 10-year-old smartphone connected to one of those cheap Class D amplifiers that you can get on Amazon and connected to some old speakers that are sitting up on the cabinets there. Very, very basic, but with that I've got my Pandora and I've got my podcasts and I've got my streaming radio and everything else that you might need. It's really tremendous, especially for certain types of machining projects where you're doing a lot of repetitive parts. That happens sometimes. Sometimes you got to spend a whole day making bolts or whatever. So for those types of days, a sound system is just a godsend. Of course, all of that stuff needs juice, so at the front of my shop here I have a sub panel that I had installed when I moved in. This is just a basic 60 amp panel, but it's got lots of room to expand. I actually wanted a 100 amp panel originally, but the electrical code here is such that when you go to 100 amps, it's sort of a threshold you cross where a whole bunch of stuff has to get upgraded in a very, very substantial way, and it was going to be 10 times the cost versus a 60 amp panel, so I went with the 60 amp, which is plenty for a model engineering shop. I had to do something though, because when I moved into this space, it was an empty drywall box for starters. Everything that you've seen here today is stuff that I did to this space. And it had 2 outlets, one on each wall of the entire garage, and the door openers and those outlets and the lights were all on a single 15 amp breaker in the main panel. Just a disaster electrically in here, totally unusable. So I had the sub panel put in and I had them put in all the outlets and everything, got it ready to use as a workshop, and here's the final result. I hope something in here was useful to you. Maybe you got some inspiration or some ideas. Share your favorite things about your shop down in the comments below because, as I said at the top, I love hearing about other people's workshop layouts and things that they do that help them work more efficiently or ways that they organize and so on. This is always evolving, I think, for all of us. No workshop is ever complete, and there's always ways to make things better, ways to make things more fun, and so on. So thank you very much for watching, and thanks to my patrons who make all of this content possible, and I will see you next time.